maybe just to frame this a little bit, when we started to organize the symposium for today, we were really sitting together and thinking about what would be the ideal list of speakers who could come together to talk about what the future of Toronto should be or could be. This morning we already heard from Michael what the dreams had been that shaped the city of Toronto. And I think it's really important, or we decided it's really important to also extend our dialogue and not only to talk to each other among architects and landscape architects and urban designers, but also to invite people that are representatives of other forces that are permanently on a daily basis shaping our city. The symposium also carries a subtitle, The Next Generation of Urban Environments. And the next speaker that I'm going to introduce is going to represent one of these new environments that are maybe one of the biggest changes that our cities are going to carry on in the next 10, 20, 30 years. You might have all maybe heard about the terminology of the smart city. The smart city is an approach to equip our cities with networks of sensors, with an infrastructure that is carrying internet and is able to allow the city to perform and to learn on a daily basis from data that are floating into the systems and allow us to be more sustainable and at the end of the day, smarter. We also, and I think that was really a very nice mix, learned what it means to retrofit our cities, which was basically the last speaker. Kevin really showed what it means to move forward and to understand that we are dealing with a new form of sustainability and to really take advantage of this. Stephen, to some degree, was really presenting what it means to understand what the history of a city is. And we have the Fort York as a direct neighbor of our site. And Kristina Verner is going to talk about another direct neighbor. And the neighbor is so large that you probably didn't recognize it quite directly by designing. So the waterfront of Toronto along the Lake Ontario, which is basically covering the whole footprint of the former industrial area, is the largest urban regeneration project in North America. And I think this is a pretty big thing that a city takes on. And you probably already saw the first implementations. I mean, we heard earlier from Kim the designs that are going on in the Don River mouth, where the landing is of the Don River Valley. You probably also know the implementations that had been designed by West 8. So this is a really, really important project for the city. And Kristina Verner is going to talk about another aspect of this urban regeneration project. So I just want to briefly read her bio and then I close with some comments from my side. Kristina Verner is the Director of Intelligent Communities of Waterfront Toronto, where she is responsible for a variety of strategic initiatives with a goal towards creating one of the world's preeminent intelligent communities. She serves as a VP Ontario for iCanada and is a founding member of the Board of Advisors for Walsh University ICF Institute for the Study of the Intelligent Community in North Canton, Ohio. In 2013 and 14, under her stewardship, Waterfront Toronto led the bid to have the City of Toronto recognized by the Intelligent Community Forum as one of the top 7 intelligent communities in the world. 2012, Verner received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Medal for her leadership and commitment to the creation of intelligent communities that support the transparent, connected, vibrant communities and economies that will foster national prosperity. I'm sure Kristina will move very, very deep into the topic of what it means to design intelligent communities. We briefly had a discussion, for sure, by preparing the symposium and also during the lunch break. It's very much about connecting the infrastructures that are set in place along these public spaces and also to support the community that is going to benefit from these infrastructures. Thank you, Kristina, for coming today, and welcome.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you guys today. We have a lot of territory to cover off, and I want to tie in with some of the earlier topics that we've discussed as well and give you a snapshot of what's happening in the waterfront, because it is quite a transformative project, and it was so compelling. I'm a small town girl, to be honest. I'm from Windsor, so I was very interested to hear about the Windsor connection. But when I actually had the opportunity to learn about what was happening along this new blue edge of the waterfront, it's one of those generation shaping sort of opportunities that you want to be a part of. There's this legacy that's being built along there that is just absolutely remarkable. So, as was noted, it is one of the most significant city building projects in the world. When you look at it in terms of scope and scale, it's interesting. We're familiar with a lot of other initiatives, like the Battery Park revitalization, which is 37 hectares, or the Canary Wharf revitalization, which is 110 hectares. But the waterfront revitalization in Toronto is representative of 800 hectares or 2,000 acres of land. And that basically spans, if you think of it, all the way from the Ontario Place lands through to the Port lands, and then back to the West Don lands where the Pan Am Athletes Village and so on is being built today. As I mentioned, it is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. There's over 200 years of history of plans for the waterfront, and the one thing that's certain is that we only have one chance to get it right. So it's a matter of proper planning and great partnerships to get it where we are today and to make sure that we continue to move forward in a very positive direction. When we looked at the best practices from around the world and we heard from the public, we knew that we wanted our waterfront to be beautiful and iconic. It needed to be animated, active, walkable, human scale, and really reconnecting this vastly underutilized and somewhat desolate land back to the rest of the beautiful city of Toronto. It needs to become that place where people want to be, where there's a lot of activity, and sort of becomes that destination for a variety of different types of economic opportunities. And I'll talk a little bit later on about sort of our focus on innovation and next generation technology as well. It's important, though, that we keep in mind that we are competing globally, and there was some discussion about that earlier. So you have these other large, wonderful urban city centers that are also focusing on their revitalization and how to make sure that they don't get leapfrogged. So we're really competing on a global scale and focusing on becoming sort of a best-of-breed solution. And as I said, there was over 200 years of planning. Lord Simcoe had plans for the waterfront, as you heard earlier. And it's been a slow and steady process to make it something that's beautiful. So our challenges include public cynicism, something about those 200 years of just waiting and seeing and planning and doing little things here and there, tended to force this to be a bit of an uphill battle. There's been a stop and start, and some of those earlier starts I would suggest probably haven't been the most beneficial to the City of Toronto when you think of the whole wall of condos type of thing that's happened in sort of the central waterfront. That's been a bit unfortunate. We've also had a series of complex projects. A lot of people, and I was getting very nervous before I moved, there was a lot of criticism about what was not seeming to happen down there. But when you realize how complicated everything that happens down there, because it's all very contaminated fill, the infrastructure's horrible that was down there that all had to be rebuilt. You're basically building a brand new city within a highly functional city to begin with. And some of the things that they found when they've dug into that fill have been, terrible coal tar things. They found entire ships. They found houses that have been buried underneath some of the fill, because everything south of Front Street is all contaminated fill. So the cost of doing anything is extremely high as well. There's global competition, both in terms of the skills that we require to do this project, but also making sure that we're staying in the lead. And then finally, we've had limited resources. So when you look at the Waterfront Toronto project, a lot of people will look back at that $1.5 billion in seed money that was received from the 3 levels of government. So $500,000 from each of the City of Toronto, the Province of Ontario, and the federal government. Initially, I believe the amount that they thought it would take to revitalize the entire 2,000 acres was approximately $8 to $9 billion. And that was going back, 15, 20 years ago when sort of this new instance of planning started. Now when you look at today's numbers, that's up to $34 billion. So the resources are extraordinarily scarce, and how do you continue to roll out success? Waterfront Toronto uses a very different approach. So we aren't exactly a government agency, and we aren't exactly a development firm either. So we're looking at revitalization as opposed to redevelopment. Real estate economics does underpin how we're able to do things to help close that $1.5 to $34 billion gap, but it's very heavily driven by public policy agendas and doing things differently to up the game for the City of Toronto. It's not just more of the same. So you heard earlier today about the design review panel for the City of Toronto. That was actually modeled after the design review panel that Waterfront Toronto introduced as well for its projects. So there's been a lot of lessons learned from the waterfront process. The same goes for our public consultation piece, and some of those practices have carried out through the rest of the City of Toronto and so on as well. We are the master planners officially for the waterfront, so we have created, in partnership with some wonderful design firms, these great precinct plans, working closely with our stakeholders, the city, the province, and the federal government as well. And then we're bringing each of those pieces to life. Some of the world's best design minds have come to work on the waterfront projects. We've had 4 of the world's top 10 landscape architectural firms working with us. The design review panel for the waterfront was created back in 2005, and to date, the waterfront revitalization has been in receipt of more than 60 different design awards for the various projects. A key focus for us has been the creation of exceptional quality of place. This is Corktown Common. If you haven't been down to the waterfront, this is a truly remarkable park that actually has another purpose to it that I'll talk about in a moment. But it's actually like a little oasis of nature down in the West Don lands. We've been raising the bar for sustainability. We've got to focus on high performance buildings. We've got minimum green building requirements that we've actually just revised for our version 2.1 MGBRs. LEED certification, LEED Gold is a minimum, but when you look at our new MGBRs, it's closer to pretty much being LEED Platinum. And when Waterfront was starting to require that, it wasn't so much an accepted industry standard. It was really raising the bar 10 years ago. Recycling contaminated soil, so rather than trucking out all the fill when it's being dug up, we actually, in the middle of Lake Ontario, have a soil recycling facility that can cleanse and reclaim that land so we can use it for other purposes. Sorry. We've also built new aquatic habitat along the lakeshore. My sustainability officer doesn't particularly like when I call them fish hotels, but there's actually 6 new types of fish that have actually come back into the Lake Ontario ecosystem as a result of that work, which is pretty small but remarkable as well. Building sustainable mixed-use communities, and one of the neat things that I had never heard about was about the street trees. Coming from Windsor, you just don't have street trees. It seems like they're just not there. It's not a consideration. But these hold the Silva-cell technology to build the street trees to prevent soil compression and ensure that they get their proper moisture and aeration. So the street trees, if you get a chance to look at Sugar Beach, if you come down, the street trees that are there that have been there for 3 years, in most urban settings look like they'd be about 10 or 12 years old. There's almost a full canopy over Sugar Beach now, which is absolutely beautiful and striking. The future-ready infrastructure. So this is, again, another view of Corktown Common. It actually serves as the flood protection landform from the West Don Lands watershed area. So this was, somebody mentioned $1 billion, I call it the $1 billion pile of dirt. It wasn't quite that amount, but in the big scheme of things, what this will protect is from another Hurricane Hazel type of event devastating the downtown Toronto area. And rather than just building a hump or a mound at the base of the West Don Lands, this beautiful park has been created. So this is another use of very innovative multi-use land reclamation from the Waterfront project. There's also a beautiful pavilion, which you can see just up near the top right, which gives you some idea actually of the scale of this particular picture. That pavilion has a wonderful barbecue, a little fire pit, and everything that you could have as well for the summer. And these marshy areas are now populated with fish habitat, as well as you see like wonderful birds that have come into that area during the migration as well. The particular aspect of the project that I work on is something called intelligent communities. So typically when cities are being built, they worry about their roads, water, electrical, sewage, infrastructure. But the reality is, in our new communities, we have to think about our data infrastructure as our sort of 4th or 5th main infrastructure that needs to be put in place. So from Waterfront's perspective, what we've done is put in a fiber optic network to connect absolutely every residential unit in the waterfront in the newer areas. And then also all of the office buildings. This infrastructure, without getting into too much of the detail, is going to be able to be upgraded time and time again. The network itself, with our partners Beanfield, has to be kept in the world's top 7 networks in terms of price and performance for 10 years after the last building is built. So we're not talking like 10 years from now, we're talking probably 30, 35 years from now, that this neighborhood won't get leapfrogged in terms of its technology capacity. There's going to be ubiquitous Wi-Fi as well throughout the waterfront. And one of the other pieces that we're very proud of is our digital inclusion strategy that I'll talk about momentarily as well. The public engagement portion is something else Waterfront is very proud of. Building this great community asset requires a lot of input, and there's obviously a lot of heartfelt opinions about how that should take place. And Waterfront makes sure that they've consulted regularly and repeatedly. I know just in the last couple of weeks, there's been at least 6 different public consultation sessions that I'm aware of, whether it be about the Gardner or about the Queens Quay revitalization. It's a very active time right now in the waterfront for a number of major projects. Our business model, we do look at phase development based on market absorption, so our numbers do tend to fluctuate a little bit in terms of when things will be completed. We take public investments for the strategic infrastructure so that things like all of the water, the sewage, the actual data infrastructure as well is all in place for the developers. And we help to alleviate some of the uncertainty to provide an equitable partnership that will share the risk with our development partners as well. We've created enabling infrastructure. We arrange for the zoning and all planning approvals. We do our Section 37 negotiations with the city in advance and put the public spaces and public realm in place to help to encourage the activity down prior to the development happening. So what have we done so far? 23 new or improved parks. So our overall commitment to building parks with public green spaces will result in roughly 300 hectares of new parks and green spaces in the entire designated waterfront area. So some of hopefully the gardens and so on that had been anticipated for the waterfront 200 years ago will eventually make their way there. The promenade that connects the water's edge, there's some unique attributes to that to make sure that the public feels welcome and connected back to that area. We have some very specific ground floor animation requirements that help to alleviate the privatization of the water's edge as well. So for instance, there can't be any condo units or anything like that on the ground floor of any of the buildings going into our areas. It has to be some sort of an animated space so that no one, rather directly or indirectly, gives that sense of ownership on the water's edge. So here's a few before and after pictures. Sorry, some of the slides look like they went a little wonky. This here is Sherbourne Common, before and after. This is another interesting multi-purpose type of infrastructure. This beautiful public art is actually a stormwater treatment plant as well that goes through and filters and uses lights to cleanse the water before it goes back out to the lake. It goes out 99% pure. This here, if you recognize Redpath Sugar Factory in the background, is Sugar Beach. Some of you may have been able to have attended events down there with Corus. Underpasses typically serve as a delineation mark for a lot of neighborhoods. Underpass Park is one of the great ways that we've reconnected underneath the Gardner to give a little bit more functional and safe space for the youth in these neighborhoods, and this is in the West Don Lands as well. This here is the pavilion area for Corktown Common, which is a fairly remarkable transformation. So if you've been down to downtown Toronto lately, you've probably been very frustrated with trying to get down certain areas. I always love getting into the cabs, and the cabs will be complaining about all the construction, and I immediately feel like I should just say, well, I'm sorry. But if you've been down, Queens Quay has been shut down for the better part of 6 months in various different phases. And that actually was at one point named one of the 10 ugliest streets in the world. And that's been a bit of our challenge of how do we actually transform it. This is what Queens Quay will look like after. So we're relocating, we're taking 4 lanes of traffic, taking it down to 2, we're moving the streetcar and repositioning that. adding our granite promenade here, which is one of the things that helps to signify the public promenade. There'll be these series of wave decks that will help to connect it. Beautiful street trees again. And it will almost become our signature street, if you will. So we'll take this big eyesore and turn it into something rather remarkable. So patience will be worth it. And the good news is all of that has to be done before Pan Am. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. And here's another example of how those wave decks have come into place and how they've created a new quality of place for folks. And those wave decks, when you go down in the middle of the day in the summer or in the early evening, there's always people on the tiered wave decks just sitting and enjoying the evening. It's a very animated space. So in terms of additional projects, it hasn't just been the government that's been active down there or us. There's been significant private investment. The first commercial investment that went down there was Corus Quay, which is Corus Entertainment's home. They consolidated 11 different Toronto-based office areas into this one building. There's 3 Toronto radio stations and 24 television services that are actually programmed out of this building. It's a very, very interesting space. It's 450,000 square feet, and it brought down 1,200 workers right to the waterfront. Another key portion of our strategy was around making sure that the waterfront had activity year-round. It can be very cold and very harsh down by the lake. So how do we make sure that there's some vibrancy? So Corus had a great cohort of workers, but George Brown with their health and wellness campus has brought in 5,000 full-time and part-time students that are down there all year round and leveraging the services and the businesses in the area as well. These are both right adjacent to Sugar Beach. River City, the first phase is complete. This was our first residential units. They moved in last March. Obviously, they don't look like that anymore. That's phase 2. And River City represents our partnership with Urban Capital. There was 110 units that went in and were occupied in March, and then that second phase is nearly complete right now. The Pan Am Athletes Village. What is a really neat story about Pan Am is actually they're sticking to the original precinct plan for Pan Am. It's not like they're building an athletes village to house athletes that will then have to be retrofit in some way, shape, or form to then turn into market housing. This is the original precinct plan, and it's the original building plans that are being built out right now. And they're all capped off, and actually they're ahead of schedule for the athletes village. The athletes will move in. There are some temporary walls that are in place for those buildings, and the kitchens aren't being fully outfit for them. But then after the games, they'll be completely redone on the inside for the market housing. So these will be occupied by their permanent members or permanent residents in 2016. And that's right next to the beautiful Corktown Common Park as well. One of the other fundamental things that we have for Waterfront Toronto is making sure, as our CEO puts it, that we aren't building an enclave for the uber rich. A lot of waterfront communities tend to belong to only those that can afford it at the very highest income levels. 20% of our housing has to be affordable rental housing, affordable market housing. And we also have a number of partnerships with TCHC in terms of making that affordable for families to live as well. So there's actually, in some of our TCHC townhomes, 3, 4, and 5 bedroom units that are geared to the standard living wage within Toronto for people like firefighters, police officers, and so on. There's also seniors housing that's going up right now. Mond is a project by Masha Safti with First Golf that's going in right by that beautiful art installation at Sherbourne Common. So you can see the arms over there. We expect them to break ground this year on that project. Bayside is a project with Heinz in Tridel, and this has been a real gangbuster for us. I mean, transit is something that's a bit sensitive in the waterfront area. We have great bus rapid transit, essentially. It's not quite BRT, but with TTC that services this area. Every 6 minutes, there's a bus that gets to George Brown College, which is really phenomenal. We will be getting streetcar service at some point, but we just don't have an exact timeline. But the reluctance or the fear was always, without that transit link, how well would these units sell? How much would people want to come down there? Bayside, for their first phase, they were still building out their sales center, and they had it 80% sold. So there's a real appetite to live down here in this beautiful public area as well. Return on investment, just to give you some ideas, and I won't go through these numbers too much, but again, we've spent, as of last summer, about 1.26 billion of that 1.5 billion to do all of the work that you've seen thus far. And that's transitioned when you take the direct government revenues that have been created, as well as the private sector investment, into almost the full amount being returned to government already in terms of taxation dollars. The 6 projects that are up here are equivalent to a $2.6 billion infusion from the private sector as well. So this model is working in terms of how we're being able to turn things over for new development and new lands. And then indirectly, there's another $9.6 billion worth of new or recently planned developments adjacent to the waterfront area. So we can't take 100% of the credit for this, but we'd like to think that some of this exceptional public realm space and so on that we've been creating has helped to be a bit of an engine to spur some of this other growth and development in the downtown area as well. So we have come a long way, but there's still a lot of work to do. And one of the key areas that we're focusing on is this intelligent community component. So intelligent communities and smart cities, there is a slight difference in terms of their definitions, and I don't want to go too deep into it, but essentially, smart cities really focus on things like fiber infrastructure and sensors and sort of optimizing the resources that cities have to manage today. Whereas intelligent communities look more holistically at the community assets and figure out how to make them economically more attractive and prosperous going forward. So I'm going to use the Intelligent Community Forums model to sort of situate this for context. So they also look at the broadband component or technology component, the knowledge workforce, so how well are the post-secondary institutions helping to prepare the next generation of workforce, as well as reacting to market changes from a skills retraining standpoint. In certain communities, that's a even bigger focus than normal post-secondary education would be. Innovation across all sectors, so not just relying on things like app developers to keep the city innovative. How are even the public sector agencies becoming more innovative and more efficient in how they're doing things? How are universities being innovative and responding to student needs? And then again, how are companies innovating new products or evolving their services as well? Advocacy, this is a whole, how well does the city tell its story? I know the jokes write themselves about Toronto right now for a certain degree, but the advocacy component of positioning your city and being able to be representative of a globally leading intelligent community is really key. And there's a lot of competition out there to attract sort of the knowledge workforce, the youth. How do we retain the youth? That's all part of the story that has to be told. And then digital inclusion. And this is underpinned by 3 key things, which is leadership, collaboration, and sustainability. And that's a triple bottom line sustainability model, so economic, environmental, and social as well. So Waterfront, actually, if I can just go back, is building their community in many ways very representative of this model. So it's not just looking at in isolation. The ICF, or the Intelligent Community Forum, which is a New York-based think tank, actually cites the Waterfront Initiative as probably their first instance of a city that is building itself with all of the pillars present, which is a really remarkable thing for us. In terms of other leading intelligent communities, and there'll be some names on here that you'll expect, and then others that you'll sit there and scratch your heads for a while. But the thing is that their model, it can be applied to cities of all different sizes. So scale isn't relevant in their model. The ones that are highlighted in blue have won the competition. So every year there's a competition the ICF holds. Approximately 400 to 450 cities will apply. They shortlist that to 21. There's a further application process. They go to 7. And then from there, they choose the top city each year. So there are some familiar faces. Canada has always led the way in this competition. And that's because we've actually been thinking about this topic a lot longer. So some of our infrastructure pieces are a little bit behind because we as a nation let ourselves get leapfrogged. But largely the whole thought process and the collaborative nature of how we do things has held us in very strong stead. Little known fact is actually the ICF started in Toronto back in 1995 and then moved their operations to New York. Happy to say they're bringing their big conference into Toronto though for their 20th anniversary next year, so that'll be pretty good. All right, so in terms of the technology and some of the things that we're doing from a real life perspective on the waterfront. We do have our ultra broadband piece, which is a full suite of offerings. Just to give you some idea, our connections right now are a full 100 meg symmetrical, so download and upload with absolutely no data caps for $60 a month. I mean, if I could get that service where I was at, I'd be thrilled, but we can't. With the full Wi-Fi connection throughout the whole neighborhood, in the public realm as well as in all the buildings, there's full IPTV and there's voice over IP phone service. But one of the things that we've done, in addition to that quality offering and the price offering that we've guaranteed, is we've also made a scholarship program a part of what we require our carrier to do. So once there's a certain amount built out in the waterfront, there's 2 different streams, one in terms of content and one in terms of infrastructure, that they're required to offer scholarships through U of T and George Brown, I believe it is, where they'll keep bringing in students to actually keep creating this ecosystem and keep things moving forward. The digital inclusion component, so it's great that we have all of this wonderful technology, so long as everyone can be connected. So in our financial model for the waterfront, we've actually made sure that no one gets left behind. So as we go through our capital component of building out the network, which isn't using public tax dollars, by the way, there's a whole financial formula behind that. There's actually a cross subsidy that's happening between the market housing and the affordable rental housing, so that everyone will get access to this infrastructure at the same speeds. But what's unique is that our carrier has come forward and they're actually going to be offering the connectivity at no charge to all of the affordable rental housing. So the students that are living in there, the workers that are living in there, they'll be fully connected and they won't have to worry about where's the $60 a month going to come from. It won't be a barrier to access for them. So the next piece up, this gets more into the smart city component, is we're partnered with IBM and a company called Element Blue for their intelligent operations centers, part of their offering. So taking data from sensors and taking and turning that data into insight, so we can make decisions about sustainability or make decisions about energy performance. Also, how is, from a public safety and security, video analytics, how can we actually do some virtual safety and security type of modeling? How can we help to support aging at home? All of these pieces will fit on top of this infrastructure that we've built with IBM. The other key thing that we're doing with this particular component is creating a sandbox environment for young entrepreneurs, for students who either want to do research or product development in this type of area. So we've got this, basically this Ferrari of infrastructure, and we're basically saying, who wants the keys? We'll let you drive. And you just partner with us. We'll even give you an environment. We'll give you people and neighborhoods to test on. Just contact us. And the really unique thing is when you look at the fact that everyone's wired up. Everybody's going to be connected. There's almost this compulsory type of environment of a living lab that tends to be created where you don't have to worry about the basic plumbing or the basic infrastructure from a data standpoint. New product development, things that are very heavy on video, for instance, where bandwidth can get to be an issue, it's no longer an issue. So the types of things that we're seeing interest from the private sector are services that they're starting to plan out their product path for 3 to 5 years out for their normal commercial markets, but they want to test it in the waterfront today. So that'll be a very interesting piece to play with. But if any of you have either yourself or have friends that are interested in doing more in the smart city space or an app development space to tie into city services, we're happy to help to link you into that. We also have a full social back end on this as well that we're bringing to life right now. So because you look at that long sort of acquisition period when people buy a condo or commit to a condo, but then they don't actually become community members for 2-3 years until it becomes theirs. How do we begin to build that sense of community in a virtual space that will have them coming down to events, get them talking to their future neighbors, and to get to sort of know one another before they're even here? So our goal for that is to actually do a lot of citizen engagement pieces on that. We just recently have gone through, last September, we were IBM's North American launch partner on something they call peopleforsmartercities.com. So if you're interested in smart cities type of approaches, this is a great site. It's a global site for ideas exchanging around, I think they've got healthcare, government, transportation, sustainability. All of those, you can share ideas, you can actually tag things, and there's going to be a global competition coming up as well for students that'll have a very nice prize attached to it on that particular piece as well. So again, we have sort of 5 key pillars we're looking at from a Waterfront Toronto perspective through this smart city or intelligent community piece. There's a public policy component with things like our digital inclusion piece, job creation. When the waterfront's fully built out, there will be 40,000 new employees, 40,000 residential units, which represent 110,000 new people. So in that area, we're basically doubling the population within the designated waterfront area within a fixed period of time, so it's a very quick growth period. We're looking at the applications of how technology can actually improve quality of life, looking at trying to evolve our infrastructure. So our network is actually Canada's first open access ultra broadband network. So we're basically building one highway that all the carriers can use, which is very common in Europe, but not very common in North America. You know, here, Bell, Rogers, TELUS, they all want their own. Whereas here in the waterfront, we've committed our carrier to say, nope, you've built the 401. Everybody drives on it. An open innovation collaboration ecosystem. So this is things like saying, here's a sandbox, let's play together. And we've got some great partners already, but we want to expand that. So both IBM and Cisco are partners in that ecosystem, as well as some smaller companies in Toronto. And we also work with Ryerson at the DMZ and so on to try and get some young ideas in there. And then we're trying to help transform the story that's being told about this to raise awareness about the City of Toronto. And you probably heard just yesterday, Cisco committed $100 million of investment in the downtown area in Toronto to create their Internet of Everything lab, or their innovation center in their new offices, which will be a phenomenal resource to tie into all of this type of development as well. And proud to say their offices are within the waterfront area too. Okay, the next component is around the ICF process. We have been recognized in the top 7 on 3 separate occasions, one of which is this year. The ICF also showcases one special criteria each year. This year's focus is on culture, which is a really remarkable thing for the City of Toronto. And they look at arts and culture, heritage, and the attitude of the city in this piece. So in April, we'll be welcoming the ICF for 2 days to come and validate everything we've told them about the City of Toronto, show some things that you can only really get a sense of by experiencing and feeling, and share some other stories. And from a little geeky perspective, yes, that was the CN Tower in ICF colors last year. And it will be again on April the 15th. And then probably the exciting piece, so everything that I've ever been involved with has basically been virtual, right? I'm very excited to be part of our new innovation center that we're right now going through the whole procurement for. This represents 350,000 square feet of space right adjacent to Sugar Beach, and what we call our blocks 1 and blocks 2. And what we're looking at doing is some very creative and innovative use of space where it's very open. Companies that want to collaborate will come together and be able to take their product to the next level. So a lot of younger companies have the benefit of like a Communitech or an accelerator center, but then when they grow up and they graduate, they go into sort of standard Class A office space with cubicles and walls. But they crave this sort of exciting environment. So we want to give that opportunity to them. And we're looking very forward to seeing those proposals as they come in. And I'm very happy to say, because it's a little different than what you would expect in a Toronto context because of all the towers and so on, the interest in this space has been remarkable. So we've got a fairly tight grouping of the type of companies that we want to see in that space. As again, there's 350,000 square feet of space. We have over 1 million square feet of interest at market rates for that space. So whomever gets that contract is basically going to have no issue leasing it up. I would suspect you'll see that by 2017, 2018, open on Sugar Beach. All right. So we are delivering on the promise of the waterfront. The next year or two, you're going to see a lot of massive changes on there and a lot of things coming above ground where we've been doing a lot of work below ground. I would invite you to learn more about what we're doing, to reach out. I've even said if there's some interest, we can even arrange some sort of a tour down there once the weather gets a little better. You don't want to be down there right now. It's really remarkable the rate of transformation that you're seeing. And again, it's a great environment for you to come in and actually meet with practitioners and see how things are transforming right before your eyes. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.